Chris Lee and Blake Lovell of Southeastern 14 presented by Stakes. We're talking about SEC basketball results from this past Saturday. Blake, let's start in Knoxville, where Kentucky pulls a stunner with Tennessee. The Cats made a living at the foul line. And our question going into this one was, how much does Kentucky want to play the rest of the season? And perhaps we got our answer there.
Well, I mean, it's the first time we've seen it in terms of like a big game like this on the road, and that's why it's people can have fun and say, well, you got it wrong and all this, but like I think it's interesting because we brought this up in the preview. Was look, this is one where like you're almost like willing to be wrong, knowing that like everything we've seen to this point gave us no indication, right, that Kentucky was going to rise to the occasion here. And you could say, well, after that South Carolina game, you just knew they were going to turn it around. Who?
No, you didn't.
Who knew you were going to turn it around, right? Like it's kind of one of those things where we said it could go one of two ways. Either they do the same things they've been doing and get blown out at Tennessee, or maybe, just maybe, like you finally see something sort of turn a little bit, knowing that essentially, they hadn't hit rock bottom in the way that a Georgia or a Vanderbilt have in recent years, but they hit rock bottom in terms of losing to the worst team in the SEC, which, boy, we're going to have a discussion about that in a minute.
Oh, man.
Like, and where do you go from there? There's nowhere to go but up, right? But they're able to do something where I thought it was very clear from the beginning of the game, outside of that 8-0 run to start things off, that Kentucky became the aggressor. They became what they had to become to win a game like that. They didn't just sit back and let Tennessee dictate everything that happened. They got to a point to where, enough was enough, and you saw a little bit of that edge start to come in. Like you started to see a little bit of that. And that's all I think people were asking for, is you just need to see, because if you really look at it statistically, right, and how that game played out, Kentucky wasn't great on the offensive side of the floor. And in all honesty, if Tennessee doesn't miss 8 layups or whatever it was, wide open essentially at the rim, Tennessee probably wins the game. But at the same time, I still thought you started to see some things turn for Kentucky that you hadn't seen in big games. And, whether that is as simple as an Antonio Reeves, making some big shots, CJ Frederick making some
had a
big
good
shots.
game.
Like maybe it was as simple as that, but I still thought that there were a lot of and remember, they're playing without Severe Wheeler, which I already know the discussion is going to be had there, and I'm sure it's already been had. To say, well, we're better off without him and all this other stuff. I know that's going on. That discussion's going on somewhere, but we did say, Chris, we've said this before. The lineup of a Reeves and Frederick at the same time can present some different sort of issues for other teams defensively when they're making shots. Now, consistently, that maybe hasn't happened as much as they wanted to, but all that to say this, it was never a question of talent with Kentucky, and that's why we had that talk about, were we really just that wrong about them not being talented enough? And we said, no way. Like, they're talented enough to win games against good teams, but the mindset was not there. They had not shown the mindset to be tough enough to win these kind of games, tough enough mentally to win these kind of games on the road in road atmospheres. But you know what? Here's what happened. They got punched in the mouth, which I know Cal kind of probably would laugh about that, maybe figuratively, after what was it? Was it Wallace or something that got busted open early? But and they got back up. I think in so many other games we've seen Kentucky in this season, specifically the Alabama ones, the Missouri ones, when they got it taken to them early on, you never felt like they were able to match the other team's sort of aggressiveness the rest of the way. They did that here. And yes, a lot of credit goes to Kentucky for finding a way to win this game, because they absolutely had to have it. And it can be a potential season-saving win for the Cats.
How did Case and Wallace's back look? I didn't get to see most of that game. I did get to see the end. My kids both had basketball games this weekend, which cut a lot into what I was able to watch. But he doesn't score. I think it was back spasms coming in. How did he look when you saw him Saturday?
Well, I mean, I don't know what the official situation was, well, I get it. I see what you're saying, but he, yes, like it was, and we said that going into the game, right? Like here's something to watch for. And we talked about Jacob Toppin. We said, look, these two guys, Toppin hadn't played in that game before against South Carolina. Wallace had been dealing with back spasm. These are things you have to look out for. But no, I mean, was he the same player he has been at full strength? Of course not. So no, I mean, it wasn't one of his best games. I think that's clear to say. But clearly, I think the back issues had something to do with that. So yeah, I mean, it was, and that's something like we said, we talked going into it. We're like, look, back spasms are something that they don't just go away one day and that's it, right? Like it can be a nagging thing that just kind of pops up, and I assume that was part of what happened as well in this game. So
for Tennessee, it's kind of been the same thing when they lose 3 of 21 from 3. Vols just littered with foul trouble all over the place for them too, which had a big impact on the game.
Well, yes, but I think the bigger issue was not just that they didn't make threes, which, as we said, we thought Tennessee was turning a corner offensively, but here they are again, back kind of maybe at square one.
But
they're not, Chris, because if you saw that game, they're not. Because if you look at it from that standpoint, they missed a lot of threes, and they missed so many open layups. I mean, I don't mean they're not turning a corner in terms of they're not a bad offensive team, but have they turned the corner from the team that we've talked about, unfortunately, for several years now, saying if there's one thing that kind of holds them back sometimes, it's having stretches where they just cannot score offensively. If that's the discussion, then I don't know if they've turned that corner. Maybe even we thought they did, but this is the kind of game that resets your expectations a little bit, because are they going to have a lot of games where they miss that many open layups? No. Are they going to have, this many games where they miss this many threes? Maybe. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's fair to wonder if it is something that could sort of pop back up, and maybe it is something we have to start kind of looking at with this team, because it's something we mentioned from the start of the season. And I don't know that if you played that game out 100 times, if Tennessee would miss that many layups, if they would miss that many threes. I mean, that's 3 of 21. You're missing 18 of 21 shots. Probably make a couple more here or there. Vescovy couldn't hit anything. James couldn't hit anything. Key couldn't hit anything. Zeeler didn't make one. So I still don't know that I would, and I was on the bandwagon of saying maybe their offense is figuring it out, and it's dangerous for that to know that because their defense is so good. But this one does. It kind of resets your mind a little bit, and you start thinking about all these games over the years, big games where we've seen Tennessee have these stretches where maybe they struggle a little bit offensively. I don't know. That just was kind of a flashback, I'm sure, for Tennessee fans, and a very frustrating offensive performance. But again, I would not discount Kentucky's play in that too. I thought Kentucky was aggressive defensively. Finally, like they look like that they were playing a lot more hard nosed, and so yeah, I wouldn't just put that on Tennessee. I put some of that with Kentucky. I mean, Tennessee only had 4 offensive rebounds. That's one of the best offensive rebounding teams in the country. So keep that in mind too. So yeah, I mean, there's certainly some things to take away from on both sides, and I wouldn't overreact on either side, but I think that's the kind of Tennessee performance that will frustrate Tennessee fans, probably knowing that they've seen some of those before in big games. But on the flip side, for Kentucky, does it completely change the outlook of your season? I don't know, but boy, it's a whole lot better than it was after Wednesday or Tuesday or Wednesday night game, whatever that was, against South Carolina.
Yeah, well, you have some hope now, which, as we said, Kentucky really hadn't done much in the way of beating good teams. And we said all along, this is a game that transcends the stats. It's can Kentucky fix whatever it is wrong with chemistry or whatever you think the issue was. When a team is playing that far off from its talent, you know it's not just an X's and O's thing, or they don't grab enough offensive rebounds, or whatever. Just throwing things out there. It's always something below the surface that's usually sabotaging things, and that was my stance on it. I think yours too is if they come out and play the way they're capable, then we can talk about Kentucky being Kentucky again. But if they don't, then it's hard to stop the downward spiral that was headed in. But hats off to John Calipari and the Cats for doing that. Okay, the most entertaining game probably, Blake, was in our backyard. We weren't there, but did watch it. Vanderbilt scored 63 points in the second half to beat Arkansas. Liam Robbins sits out all but 40 seconds of the first half, comes back, has a monster second half. You had, I don't even know how many technical fouls. Somehow Anthony Black didn't get one. That is just amazing. But hats off to Vandy. Phenomenal offensive game. And I think if you're Arkansas, you walk away with some questions after this one because they're now 1-4 in the league.
Yeah, it's almost like we've seen this story before with both Arkansas and A&M, which we'll get to them in a minute. But yeah, I mean, we talked about it. I mean, we pointed out going to the game. I think we picked Arkansas. We're like, look, if you expect this not to be close, like it's going to be a close game. Well, my point, yeah, I was going to say, like, it's, if you look at Vanderbilt's games all year long, was the point was that, hey, all these games have been close, and this one I think was a little bit closer than the 13-point final, but it is kind of interesting to think about that, like, this was actually wound up being a 13-point game in favor of the underdog. But I put the stat on Twitter: 97 points, most Vandy scored in an SEC game since 1920 season against LSU.
1920.
2019-2020 season.
Oh, gotcha.
1920. Yes, but there was actually a fan who asked me that. They're like, "Are you sure that's not 1920?" I think it was a Vanderbilt fan who was not happy with the trajectory of the program. But yeah, I mean, what do you say? I mean, unfortunately, as we said, this was a strong possibility for Arkansas. I thought they'd find a way to win, but we just mentioned, I mean, this is just kind of where they are right now. And I just think you kind of saw a team that I think what it comes down to is kind of, I don't know, they're in the same situation a lot of these other teams are in the SEC. Like maybe like a Mississippi State, although not to that level, where you almost have to be perfect defensively sometimes, given, I think, some of the limitations they have offensively. And you can say, well, they put up 84 points, which that's true. But and actually didn't shoot the ball that poorly, but they have to be able to play.
They did not get any stops in the second half.
Right. I was going to say, like, they are the kind of team that has to be able to do that, I think, with where they are right now. Like, they have to be able to use their defense to win games because, again, it's not like they were just poor offensively. But, I mean, the limitations are what they are at this point, right? I mean, outside of the starting five for Arkansas, you had Pinion who hit, or what, I think he had a 3 and he had the and 1. So he had 6 points, I believe. But like that was the I mean, Jordan Walsh didn't score, so like that was the extent of what you got. And that's what we keep talking about. And we've said it, the rotations, right? And we said, look, maybe it's kind of a launching point for Jalen Graham. Well, I mean, he didn't score. He played 5 minutes.
Nope.
So like that's what we talked about. That was probably going to be the storyline that maybe wasn't talked about enough. It's not just how they play on offense or how they play on defense. It's just the rotations game by game are going to be very tough to figure out who's going to be able to be in what spot. And I think that's the issue Arkansas is running into. I mean, because keep in mind, they've now lost, their last 3 games, not just lost their last 3, they lost the last 3 by double digits. And I just think that's the problem. We talked about this a couple weeks ago is short rotation. Muss has always used it, but now it's like you're using that short rotation out of necessity, but you don't really know what you're going to get, even in your starting 5, right? Like you're still going to have some things that are probably going to change, and minutes distribution. Like they played a lot of guys, but like they didn't have a choice because you're trying to push the right buttons. It's like, can we get a stop? Can we find somebody who can do this? They just couldn't get it done. And again, I say all that to say, I mean, what else can you say about Vanderbilt? Like, this is a team, as we said, that's been so close a lot this season. They come out in what felt like a very pivotal game in their season because they're playing an Arkansas team who's kind of reeling, and knowing that, you finally got a building that is actually energetic and it's a good atmosphere, and you give them something to, cheer about and be excited about, like in a game like this, because this was a game that honestly, Chris, felt like a throwback Vanderbilt basketball type game where all everything, playing a top 25 team at home, having a great atmosphere, and beating a top 25 team at home. That's what Vanderbilt used to do all the time.
Yep.
Like
It's
this
been a
felt
minute
like,
since they won a game like that at home. It seems like their better performances come on the road.
well, yeah, well, I mean, you can understand why in recent years
Yeah.
because again, there hasn't been a whole lot to really sometimes in the home games. Just yeah, I mean, it's just kind of is what it is. But I mean, how many different guys stepped up for them, right?
A
I mean,
lot.
Tyron Lawrence scores 22 points. And I mean, there's just like there were so many different guys that stepped up. Jordan Wright just made a bunch of big plays. Obviously Robbins played, I mean, like a lot of minutes and everybody may point to the minutes, but still in the minutes he was in there, huge contributions. Trey Thomas, I mean, go up and down the line, right? Like everybody kind of played their role. You had big games and from a lot of different guys. I know it's a lot of free throw shot. I'm sure that will be discussed and already has been, but I mean, that was a chippy game. It was an aggressive game on
Oh,
both
goodness,
sides.
yes.
And I'm not against that, by the way. I know a lot of people sometimes are like, oh boy, it's kind of getting a little too, no, come on. This is the way it was in the mid 90s. I don't remember who it was. I remember like some of the games in the mid 90s. Um, they were a lot worse than this. So, yeah, I mean, this was just a huge win for Vanderbilt, as we said. Perhaps kind of a season saving win for Kentucky. This may be kind of a season saving win for Vanderbilt, where now you play Alabama, who just looks unstoppable. Play them on tomorrow night in Nashville. That game looks a lot more interesting now than it did before. So, yeah, hats off to Vanderbilt. A tremendous performance. And yeah, for Arkansas, 1-4 with a trip to Missouri on tap on Wednesday. So,
A couple things on Vandy. I think we need a technical foul leaderboard because I'd like to see where Miles Studi and Jerry Stackhouse rank nationally. They've been getting a lot of them this year. Number two, you mentioned Tyron Lawrence. He has quietly had a really nice year for them. He's had some knee injuries, has really started to develop. He got 22 points on Saturday. And if you listen to Eric Musselman's comments post-game, he talked about he'd warned him time and time again about Lawrence going left, which is what he does, and just did it nonstop and just killed Arkansas, which makes you wonder about some things on Arkansas's end. And finally, two more things. Jordan Wright for Vandy had some back issues earlier in the year. It looks to me like he's past those because he's playing much better. And then Liam Robbins is probably, I don't know, minute for minute, Blake, I think one of the top 10 players in the league when he's on the floor. I think he's leading the league in block shots. He's an efficient scorer. I think he leads Vandy in points, rebounds, blocks, and free throw percentage, that's a lot of stuff right there. But the big beef with their fans, and I think they're right, is he's not on the floor enough. But when he is, he's a force. One more thing for Arkansas. We'll start something. We'll see if this catches. This will be the hey, you and I could have done that box score line. And guess who I'm talking about here?
don't know.
Kamani Johnson plays 9 minutes, doesn't take a shot, pulls one rebound, blocks one shot, and fouls out.
Well, sometimes you need those. Yeah, you got to use them somewhere. You get 5.
Yeah,
I mean that's the rule. You get 5. So I say use them up. That's the way I look at it. So especially in a game where you're down trying to rally, use them up. Use as many as you can.
Use them up.
So
he got his money's worth.
He did, but I mean, look, we got a lot of Arkansas fans. We know that they got to be frustrated, but I mean, there's again the schedule's not helped, but at the same time, it's just kind of I don't know.
Well, look, they've got their get right sequence coming up. No, road trip to Missouri is not going to be easy, but Ole Miss at home, LSU at home, Baylor on the road, A&M at home, and South Carolina away. That's when you got yourself a chance to maybe get back to 500 in the league. So
yeah, I mean that's what we said. Schedule's not helped, but they got to figure some things out. They can't afford to have the defense slip, which I think again I don't know if that's going to be the norm necessarily because I think giving up 84 to 84 to Alabama is one thing, but 97 maybe to Vanderbilt's another. But I think you just had Vanderbilt, just all the buttons were just boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
Like they just did everything right. And I don't know that every other team will do that, but hey, Missouri's a capable offensive team, even though, maybe they haven't shown it in the past 2 games. Back in Columbia, they've been pretty good there offensively. So that's another one where Arkansas cannot afford to let the defense slip because, as we said, they basically have to remove one element of their offense, which is 3-point shooting. So they got some things to figure out, but I think the undetermined rotation and just not knowing game in and game out what you're going to get, I think was one of the bigger issues right now for the Hogs. So,
okay, moving on, LSU and Alabama. My goodness. Well, first of all, there was the awful thing that happened this weekend with Darius Miles. We're not going to spend any time dwelling on it, but we acknowledge that. Our prayers with the community of Tuscaloosa and all the people that were affected by that. Just a horrible situation. Moving on to the game. At what point did LSU outscore Brandon Miller? Because I think 14, 15 minutes into the half or something, like, he'd outscored LSU by himself.
I don't remember what the number was. I think he had 22 at the half. LSU had 22 at the half. I think that was right, but I may be wrong about
Might
that.
have been.
Yeah, I think they were tied.
LSU did have
halftime.
22. Yeah, right.
I think they were tied at the half. I could be wrong, so trust me, someone will tell me if I am. But, I mean, look, this game was 104-59 with like 2 minutes left. So, like, I hate to say a 40-point score line is deceiving, but in a sense, I mean,
It
it's
was 37 at the half. And by the way, how about the way Alabama ended the half? Did you see that?
With
a one-handed shot from midcourt.
Was it Jaden Bradley?
I think it was Jaden Bradley.
Maybe, I don't remember. Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the problem: is when Alabama plays like this, which it's like, they had 14 threes in the first half. That's not an LSU problem. That's an Alabama problem. Like, if they play like that, there's no one in the country that's beating Alabama. If they play against LSU, there's not a team in the country that's going to beat them. And I said this, and people thought I was. I don't think Alabama fans thought I was joking, but some people thought I was like, "Are you serious?" It's not too early to say this, Chris. Like, if you're looking ahead, Alabama, to me right now, is the favorite to win the college basketball national championship.
Ooh.
Because if I look at, is that really that shocking to anyone? Like,
well,
they've beaten the number 1 team, Houston, on the road.
Well, that's true. In the Connecticut loss, which, we watched that game in Connecticut. Like, Connecticut is really
they're spiraling. So
Tennessee is number 2 in KenPom. I'd take
they just
Alabama
got beat at home by Kentucky. So
yeah,
they're the number 1 team in the country, in my opinion. I mean, if you watch Alabama play, and like that's what I said, I was very curious with some of the reaction. It's like, it's not a hot take. Alabama is probably the best team in the country.
Yeah. No,
right now,
I probably shouldn't have acted so surprised. It just sounds weird to say it out loud, but I don't know that you're wrong.
They've beaten every SEC team by at least 11 points.
Right.
Like, they are just blowing out everyone. Do I think it'll be to the extent of what they've done against LSU in this game? No.
Well, but they've won 5 of their last 6 by at least 15, I think. I was looking this up last night. Yeah.
I mean, they're the deepest team in the SEC, one of the deepest teams in the country. They've got a top 5 player in the country in Brandon Miller, if not better than that. I think they're the best team out there. Because again, if you can, I mean, we can make the numbers all. And look, I said this too.
We've had them number 1 in our power rankings for how many weeks in a row now? 4 or 5?
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe more.
I mean, yeah, they've been there at the top for a while. But like, I'm just saying, like, the number 1 team in the country as of the last AP poll, I think, was Houston, and well, they beat them. So on the road, and they just, I said, I don't think it's crazy to think that Alabama is the best team in the country. And at this point, not even having a bracket, if you just start looking ahead and say who would be the favorite right now if you had an NCAA tournament, it would be Alabama, in my opinion. I just think that they are the total package. I think that they have everything you need to win it all. The player, the system, the defense, the offense, the spurt ability. They've got all that. They've got everything. So yeah, like I think they're so good. And I say all that knowing, what's going to happen, Chris. They're going to play an ugly game at Vanderbilt because Alabama always plays an ugly game at Vanderbilt. And then you're going to have people that are probably going to, all of a sudden say this, and who knows? I
Everybody has
mean,
a blip at some point, right?
well, a lot of people usually have a blip when Memorial's rocking, especially for Alabama over the years. That's kind of been a place that I don't think they've loved.
Right.
I think they've,
They
they've
went
won
20
recently.
years without winning there at one point, I
Yeah, so
believe.
keep that in mind. That game's a lot more interesting now after Vanderbilt's performance. But yeah, what do you say? I mean, Bama was just red hot, couldn't be stopped. Don't think they'll beat everybody by 40, but they're really, really good. That's the best team he's had there, no question.
Okay, Florida beats Missouri, and I think we called this one. I can't remember now.
Yeah,
Florida had,
he picked them at Florida. Yeah.
yeah. I just didn't like the way Missouri had played lately. The computers have liked Florida all year more than we have, and Florida finally, though, maybe starting to figure some stuff out after that lost A&M 3 straight wins. Granted, Georgia and LSU were 2 of them, but they're not bad teams. Colin Castleton was terrific. Will Richard, who's a kid who transferred from Belmont in our backyard, has had one of the most efficient shooting seasons, maybe the most of anybody in the conference, and he really had a big role in what they did Saturday.
Yeah, nice win, as we said. I mean, you talk about schedule setting up nicely. It felt like it was that way for Florida. After that, to win that Georgia game and then, get a huge road win against LSU, beat a Missouri team that just has not, played well recently on the road. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a huge win for Florida because, that's a team, as we mentioned, I think just was still trying to figure some things out. And we talked about every good team they had played, they had lost to. And, I still think Missouri I think they're a good team still. They're starting to kind of fall back towards maybe what they were ultimately going to be. Probably not a top 15-ish type team all the time or anything, but um, I think so for Florida starting to win these kind of games, like we said. I mean, they took a good shot from Georgia in that game, rallied for a win. Missouri, I think, came out in this game early on, got some good stuff going, but Florida's able to find a way, to make some big play. I mean, I'll tell you someone you really need to look out for with Florida. Riley Kugel is starting to make some plays. I mean,
Yeah,
he's not playing a ton
he
of
had
minutes,
2
but
big dunks against Georgia the other night
yeah, I mean,
down
like
the
he
stretch.
in big moments, he is starting to make some plays for them, and I would definitely keep an eye on him because he is someone I think that is very key to their success. Um, so yeah, and look, he's a freshman. There will be things that maybe he still struggles with a little bit, but I still think he's someone that will be very important for them. But it's a nice win for Florida. They made shots, and that always helps. Um, but yeah, I mean, I look at it on the other side for Missouri, and I just think it's a team that's kind of, as we said, they're going to have to win with their offense, right? Um, and when they're not making shots, and this was another game, away from home. What was it against A&M? Where like they just couldn't hit shots, 7-31 from three against A&M. I think 3 of 18 against Florida. So yeah, just missed some shots and had a few more turnovers maybe than they usually have, and you combine all that together, and it's kind of another close loss here for Missouri. And I don't know. I mean, like I said, I don't know that we ever just thought Missouri was just going to steamroll, through everyone like they did against Illinois and Kentucky. I think you always knew they were kind of going to drop back a little bit. But I said before, I thought getting one of those road wins would have been huge for them because now they get the Vanderbilt special, right, of playing
Yeah.
Arkansas and Alabama at home back to back next. So, look, the Arkansas one does not look as daunting as it did before. Alabama one, no matter what happens on Tuesday, it's going to be a daunting challenge. But especially again, if Missouri doesn't play well defensively, so yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of that point where I feel like Wednesday's game against Arkansas is kind of a must win for Missouri after losing these back to back road games.
All right. If you're Mississippi State and you get 20 points out of Toulouse Smith, you finally hit some foul shots, you go 21-28 from there, you're probably feeling okay about your game with Auburn. But Auburn, as we've kind of said, Auburn has kind of quietly played pretty well of late. And the guy we talked about underrated players, Jalen Williams is having a really, really nice all-around season for the Tigers. I don't know that we've talked a lot about him, but Wendell Green plays better, hits his free throws, gets 4 steals. This is a team in Auburn that has quietly been playing pretty well and did it without John I. Broome having a good game. He's been one of the more consistent players in the league lately. So Auburn takes care of business, and Mississippi State is now 1-4 in the league, although you look at Ken Pom and the schedules had something to do with that. State has played the toughest schedule in conference so far, according to Ken Pom. And I do wonder if all those home games that State played, you kind of sometimes you need to be tested a little bit more outside your league. I mean, they did play Marquette and Utah on neutral floors. But anyway, State 0-3 on the road so far, and also a home loss to Alabama to get to 1-4.
Yeah, that's one of the more weird games, conference play thus far this season. You had a lot of weird, kind of interesting things. I don't know how else to explain it. I think Bruce Pearl said afterwards, I think in his press conference, he's like, I'm just going to take questions because I don't even know what to say after that. Auburn turned it over 20 times. And I think the turnovers, against Mississippi State, probably not that, not that surprising, right? I mean, that just happens. But they did hit some threes, and I think that was important, as we said, to see them hit shots from outside and for Jalen Williams to be a big part of that, go 5 of 7. That's huge because if they can get that, I mean, hey, they can be really, really good because that's the element that we said they've kind of been missing. And you just don't know if you're going to have that consistently, but they needed it here. And because, look, getting points at the rim against Mississippi State is going to be tough just with the way they defend. So that was an interesting element, I thought, of this game. As you said, to win without Broome playing well, but Jalen Williams, I mean, he is someone that has really kind of started to step up for them on a consistent basis, and he's been doing it pretty much the whole season. He's had to because I think that's what they need, especially if Broome, is not scoring in double digits. You've got to have Jalen Williams giving you, that kind of production, and he did there. And don't look now, Alan Flanagan, 4th straight game in double figures. So something else I think that is very crucial to Auburn season. We talked about that coming into the year. We said he's the X factor. So I know he had a lot of turnovers, and I know that was, brought up afterwards. He had 7 turnovers, but still just hitting that number, I think, is important because I just think they need him to score, and they need that other somebody that can score, to that level, knowing that Wendell Green's going to do his thing too. So think about that group of 4 right there. That gives you 4 guys in double figures, and that's what we said. Auburn needs that because I don't think you're going to have just one guy every night, that's hitting 25 points all the time. So that was big. Now, another stat, of course, it goes back to our preseason chat about Mississippi State. We said, could they be the worst shooting team in the league? Well, there's some other teams that have challenged them about that, but when you go 0 of 18 from 3, you officially hit that category here, because not to make a 3-pointer and lose by 6 is tough because, again, you hit 3 threes. If you go 3 of 18, which is a poor percentage, you still win the game, right? So that was disappointing, I think, from Mississippi State standpoint, although not surprising, just because they have struggled shooting-wise. Now, the other statistical anomaly, if you watch this game, how many free throws were shot in this game, Chris? I know you have the box score. I just want you to.
Well, I know State shot 28 from memory.
All right. Auburn shot 13. How many is that? Add that together.
41, excuse me.
41 free throws shot, right? How many of those free throws came in the first half?
I give up.
0. The most conflicting
it's
SEC
almost like
stat.
Sometimes games get called differently from half to half.
The most conflicting SEC basketball stat I have ever seen for an SEC basketball game to not have a single free throw in a half. But we correct course and make sure we have 41 in the second half. So that is my stat of the game there, my stat of the weekend. Only in SEC basketball do you get that kind of fun stuff there. So there you go. Big win for Auburn.
We need to start a box score thing and get a sponsor for it, because we had 2 good box score lines. That one and the Kamani Johnson.
Well, how about this? How about Auburn, though? I put the schedule out, and everybody's talking about how weak their schedule is. Well, Auburn doesn't determine their SEC schedule. Come on, folks. I know there's a lot of Alabama fans, but they can't determine their schedule. But Auburn's 4-1 in the league. Here's their upcoming schedule: at LSU, at South Carolina, home against A&M, home against Georgia. That's the next 4 SEC games. they're going to be favored in all 4 of those games. So, do I think they're going to win all 4 of them? I think maybe you drop the LSU one on the road. Although right now I would pick Auburn. Is it out of the realm of possibility Auburn could be 8-1 in the league?
Nope.
No. So don't discount that possibility. I don't know. Road games are tricky, as we know, but if they can win that one at LSU, I mean, I know. Look, A&M is tough. Georgia's already beaten them, but they're at home and at Auburn Arena. You don't pick against, or whatever the arena is called now. I forgot they changed the name. What is it? Neville Arena. You don't pick against Auburn. So people, we kind of, poke stuff at Auburn and say they're not as good as they were last year and all this, but their schedule sets up to possibly put them at 8-1 in the league. So,
Did you know there's a team in this league that's already more than doubled its win total from last year?
That would be the Georgia Bulldogs.
Hey, Mike White, man, that guy's doing a heck of a job.
Sorry, Florida fans.
I know Ole Miss is not playing well, and you talk about worst shooting teams. Mississippi State may not be the worst shooting team in its own state.
No, they are.
We could debate that, but maybe so. Florida, I'm looking at Ole Miss. Ole Miss 287 in effective field goal percentage right now, according to KenPom. But let's talk Georgia for a minute.
Yeah.
Cardio Quindo sort of. We talked about how they have gone more towards Terry Roberts is their go-to guy. Roberts scores 14 points on 20 shots. Quindo gets 15 on 10. Maybe that should be their cue to switch their shot distribution a little bit. But however it happened, Georgia picks one up in Oxford.
Yep. Surprised by that one. I thought this was must win for Ole Miss, and I thought they'd find a way to get it, but they didn't. And yeah, Georgia does it again. I was kind of joking about, sorry, Florida fans, but it's funny. Our guy Neil Blackman, who does the Florida Basketball Hour podcast, he always likes to point out that Mike White's actually a good coach and he's doing a good job at Georgia. And I know his comments sometimes get fun when he mentions that on his Florida Basketball Hour account, but I laugh with him because it is kind of funny that
he won a lot at Louisiana Tech too.
Well, here's the thing.
Mike White is consistently won everywhere he's been. Now, he may not have done as many big things as people wanted him to, but Mike White is one of those kind of coaches you don't appreciate till maybe you bring in the next guy and it goes horribly wrong.
Well, it's not even that.
And I'm not saying that's going to happen at Florida, but you know what I mean.
It just wasn't. He was not the person to get them to the ceiling they wanted to get to, and that's fine.
Right.
But you can still be a really good coach and not meet the expectation of trying to replicate what Billy Donovan did there. So, and that was always the case. Like, I don't think there was really ever a question. It's just like, he never had Florida in a spot where they were just a bad team, were they? I mean, so it's just like he just never got them to that level that maybe was expected, and fairly or unfairly. Now, I would agree. I mean, we said, look, after a certain time, 7 seasons, at a certain point, that relationship, if you realize it's not getting to where you want it to go, you just walk away. And that's kind of what happened here is you go reset at a place that does not have the expectations of Florida just yet. Now, look, Georgia basketball maybe eventually gets there, but right now it does not. And so you go try to fix something that's broken. At Florida, you're not trying to fix something that's broken. You're trying to take something that literally got to a level that no one else has gotten to in a long time by winning back-to-back national championships and try to build off of that. How do you do that? And so, yeah, I mean, coaching skill was never really a problem for Mike White. He just ran into some situations in Florida where they just were not able to find that consistency to get to that level they needed to get to as a program. But now, Georgia, after a 6-26 season, is exactly where they want to be as a program because they are winning games. They're 3-1 in the league. They've taken care of their business at home. They get a big road win here. I know it's against the worst team in the league, but from a record standpoint, but you know what? Any road win is a good road win, as we say in this league now. So 3-1, they're playing with a lot more confidence. I don't think it's an NCAA tournament team, but I think it's a team you're not going to want to play the entire season just based on the fact that they have a lot of positive momentum right now. Had every chance to win that game at Florida, as we said. We're leading by double digits in that one. They playing some good basketball, and it's not always going to be pretty, but it doesn't have to always be pretty. They just need wins, and they're doing that. Now they go to Rupp on Tuesday to play Kentucky. So yeah, credit to Mike White, entire staff, the players. That was a hard season last year, and for the guys that are still there, we mentioned some of them. That's a hard thing to get beyond when you hit that low of where they were last year as a team. But now they're 13-4 in a really good spot.
Trivia question. Mike White's in his 12th season. How many losing seasons has he had in conference play?
0.
1. 2011, 2012 at Louisiana Tech, which was in the fill-in-the-blank conference at the time. If you get this one right, I'll be impressed.
What year is that?
2011-12.
Well, they would have either been in the WAC or Conference USA.
They were in the WAC. They were in Conference USA 2 years later. The WAC at the time, Nevada, New Mexico State, Idaho, Utah State, Louisiana Tech, Hawaii, Fresno State, and San Jose State.
There you go. I thought it was the WAC. That sounded about right.
I don't know if I can even name a team in the WAC now. I think there's one team that's still in the WAC now that was there then.
Is Stephen F. Austin in the WAC now? I don't know.
Yes. They used to be in the Southland where they dominated.
My God.
I think the only team left in the WAC from then is New Mexico State.
They're struggling. So
yeah. Anyway. Sorry for the sidebar there. All right, one more to go. We've got
this will be quick.
Yeah, it was quick on the floor. It was 50-18 at half. Texas A&M beat South Carolina. Which has just gotten obliterated in 3 games now?
Are you ready for this? I don't know if you're ready for this.
Go for it.
So, all right. Tennessee wins at South Carolina 85-42. South Carolina wins at Kentucky 71-68. Kentucky wins at Tennessee 63-56. Have we caught up yet? This makes no sense.
And then Saturday.
And then loses at home by, 40, 41 to Texas A&M.
Yeah.
I mean, if you can make sense
of it. And it's now 235 in KenPom after that.
And here's something else to add to you. And South Carolina lost at Vanderbilt by 5 in overtime, who beat Arkansas, top 5, I know really they hadn't been playing that way, but by 13 at home. I don't know, man. It just doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, but
they were so bad Saturday was Carolina. They dropped 27 spots in KenPom, which is kind of hard to do when you're already in the 200s in mid-January.
As I said before the Kentucky game, or as I said after the Kentucky game, South Carolina was on a trajectory to be one of the worst SEC teams in a decade, statistically, along with Georgia and Mississippi State. Last year's Georgia, and there's a Mississippi State team in there somewhere, maybe 2003. I don't want to give it the wrong year, but they're back to doing that now. If you just look at the statistics after losing this game by 41. I know we kind of had, we had a good discussion with Gary, and as I said, Gary, we weren't taking offense to that, but I think the bigger thing was by winning at Kentucky, was it just South Carolina was about to turn a corner, or was it just Kentucky was about to bottom out? And it just felt like it was a lot more about Kentucky, unfortunately. Give South Carolina credit for winning it, but we said, I thought the first 15 games of the season were much more of an indicator of where South Carolina was than that one game at Kentucky. And I think this game showed that. You could sort of explain the hangover effect, Chris, if this is a close game, right? Or closer game. But you can't use that excuse to say, well, we won at Kentucky and then we just had nothing left to get beat by 41 at home. So, yeah, A&M, here they are. Don't look now. They're 4-0. Got a good chance to be 5-0.
And one of them's A&M.
Yeah, I feel like we called this about 2 weeks ago. We said, don't look now. After they won that game against Florida, we're like, uh-oh, here they go. Like they're gonna be 5-0 maybe, and they got to beat Florida to do it. Who's playing better? But here they are. We'll see. Buzz has got them rolling. They're playing better offensively, man. That's the big surprise to me. They're figuring some things out on offense. So credit to the Aggies. They are doing their thing right now. So certainly
He
disappointing.
does this every year.
Disappointing bounce back, but for South Carolina. But credit the Aggies, unbeaten in league play.
Before we go to parting thoughts, a quick shout to our sponsor, BROTHROW. Betting $11 to win 10 stinks. With BROTHROW, you bet 10 to win 10. It lets you bet on all 50 states because it's not the house. Bettors have a fair chance at winning. It is the only sports betting platform that doesn't take a cut of every bet. No minimum deposits, no minimum bets, no need to connect your bank account. Bettors pay each other directly. There's a hassle-free sign-up process that gets you in the action in seconds. Go to brothrow.com/SE14. Ask to join our private group and have some fun with us there. Okay, parting thoughts. I guess mine is that Alabama is the clear separator, or is clearly separated at the top. We'll have power rankings coming. Obviously, the other thing coming out of this week was that a rebirth for Kentucky? Because if it is, look out. And overall, just I thought a very interesting weekend of basketball, although the games weren't always interesting in terms of the final scores. But I thought a lot of developments this weekend to follow that were interesting.
Alabama plus 1,000 on DraftKings right now. Get your future bets in to win it all. You say, Texas, Houston's plus 650. Alabama is now the second odds-on team to win it all. So
I'm not.
And they've beaten the
I'm
team who's number
criticizing.
one. So I'm just saying, look, it's a long way to go. A lot can happen. But I'm just telling you right now, that's my takeaway is, yes, Kentucky, an absolutely, like I said, season-saving win perhaps at Tennessee. I think, in normal circumstances, like they're easily your team of the week, but like the way Alabama plays and Brandon Miller and all that, man, it's just like, my goodness. They are the real deal, but like I said, they got to play at Vanderbilt on Tuesday night, and that place has not been kind to them over the years. So what a fun atmosphere that could be. I think that's going to be, you talking about Arkansas atmosphere was great. Like this one's going to be, think about that. That's another takeaway. We're talking about Vanderbilt atmospheres again. Chris tweeted out a picture. What was it? Week ago, 2 weeks ago? No one in the gym.
I was there. That gym they might have had 4,000 people at the most in that building for South Carolina. And I'm talking of like at its peak. And that includes, ushers, Jerry Stackhouse's 159-person staff and everything else.
Well, it's things get interesting, and we'll see what happens. But the standings, very interesting mix: Bama, A&M, Tennessee, Auburn, Georgia, Florida, Vanderbilt. That's the top half of the group there. So,
All right, we've got power rankings coming later Monday. We got predictions we'll be putting up. In any case, thanks for watching Southeastern 14. He's Blake Lovell. I'm Chris Lee. We'll see you soon.